Close to 2 years ago, The Division was released. After a whirlwind of a hype cycle and a rather warm reception, interest tapered off as player after player pushed through the campaign and got a taste of what type of endgame content there was and saw where The Division fell short. The Division had messed up on the methods to obtain items and the itemization itself, as well as a lack of variety in the things that you could do. Arguably, these are the most important parts to any of these long-tail looter-shooter type games where after you complete a scripted story, you repeat the same content over and over again, aiming to just get better and better gear incrementally through RNG. Another really common issue at the time was that of bullet sponge NPCs, drastic imbalances, and on PC at least, hackers in the Dark Zone. And this especially sucked because the way the game's progression and reward structure was set up, you were pushed into the Dark Zone as one of the only means to improve your character, and that was an additional issue and frankly a deal breaker for those of who just didn't want a PvP at all. Now, I'm happy to say that after playing The Division for all of last month and having no reason to stop until Monster Hunter World comes out at the end of this month, and that it is in the best state it's ever been and is easily worth another shot in 2018, and is also experiencing a surge in population as people disenfranchised with the latest Destiny 2 look for something else to play, something else to do, or people who have picked it up from the huge deals over the holidays, or if they had played the free-to-play weekend enticing them to buy the game, or if they had seen the positive outcries from the community from the latest patch 1.8, which was a massive free content patch that just blew the community away. So what exactly has been added or changed? Well, that's a long list, but including the updates since release, you're looking at a lot of additional game modes. You have multiple instance-based squad PvP modes, one of which normalizes the stats on your gear, on top of an expanded Dark Zone. The Underground, which is a game mode which allows you to create randomized PvE-style missions that allow you to apply affixes, penalties, and buffs to alter the difficulty and the feel of each of these missions further. Survival, this is my personal favorite game mode. This is one where you play through a harsher and boiled down version of The Division, which could take you 10 minutes or it could take you 2 hours. You start with next to nothing and you gear up and try and move within this specific instance of a game to the Dark Zone to extract things that you will then be able to use with your normal character. All the while, you'll be trying to survive against NPCs, the cold, as well as the infection plaguing the game, and even other players if you choose to do the PvP variant of this. You also have the Resistance game mode, which is kind of a holdout style, a horde mode style mode, where you defend against waves and waves of enemies, and there are some twists to it and it makes it pretty fun, and there are multiple maps in order to do this in. In the latest update, they added a zone on the map that has dynamically spawning missions, and these can range from killing a bunch of different bosses that are scattered around the map, or shooting drones from the sky, as well as a bounty board-styled mission selection where you take on hits against specific enemies, which reward you with the means to go after even meaner enemies. They've added additional incursions on top of the dungeons, as well as different difficulty options for most of the things, as well as ranked leaderboards, and not quite content, but they have a much more robust daily, weekly, and even 15-minutely type system for rewards, as well as just earning additional meaningful, at least as meaningful as something can be in these style games. It's probably more fair to say an additional loot chance, a reward for just doing things, anything, killing enemies, exploring, looting collectibles. It all adds up fast in this sort of experience bar that you have after you have reached max level, and when it sort of pings over, you get a free piece of loot, and this just adds up doing everything. So you knock out a daily, you might also knock this out too. It is incredibly generous. They've also had a number of global events and holiday offerings. These are these like time limited events with some really cool rewards, and they have a scaling system so you can go back to zones that you were leveling in and still be rewarded, or tone up or tone down based on what your gear level's like. And while they have added cosmetic loot boxes to the game, they have also added the means to acquire them in the game, and sort of a commendation, kind of a better achievement system within the game now. But the cherry on top is that basically everything in the game is viable in terms of item acquisition and gearing up. I feel like The Division at release was having a bit of an identity crisis. It took a lot of inspiration from MMORPG itemization with this sort of staircasing of item level thresholds tied to specific activities, so it would funnel you into and then out of content. So you would do open world content until your item level was high enough, and then you would go into hard mode dungeons, and you would do those until your item level got high enough to do challenge mode dungeons, and you would do that until your item level got high enough to do incursions. And this design, besides invalidating content before whatever it is that you're doing now, outside of maybe revisiting stuff for a daily, it just doesn't work. Pigeonholing the highest tier gear in incursions doesn't make anything more fun. You just create the equivalent of raid loggers and have less viable content, because people at that level, people doing incursions, aren't going to want to do everything lower than that, and there's no point, you're not getting anything from it. And the people not high enough level don't have that option, so there's just less variety for all players. I think the most drastic thing they did was just opening up this viability. Like, sometimes all I want to do is log in and shoot some people and then log out. And if RNG smiles upon me now, just like in countless other looter shooters and action RPGs, I now have the possibility that I may log in, kill a bunch of monsters, and I may walk away with something great. And sure, there will always be a best thing, a best way to play the game, a more efficient way to do stuff, but at least it's all on the table now. The number of quality of life things they've added is also incredible, and I honestly couldn't name them all. The game just feels better to play. In addition to larger tweaks, like clearing landmarks in the Dark Zone now award a piece of cleaned loot automatically, there are events in the Dark Zone, there are item loadouts, a new mask cosmetic slot, more character customization options, ways to adjust talent rolls and boost item strength, and a really solid time to kill for PvP encounters. And honestly, the balance in the game is just in a much better place. And yes, I'm talking about PvP combat, but also PvE. Like I mentioned way earlier in the video, the bullet sponge was a concern. Now granted, some of that was just itemization was god-awful, but it also had to do with these like definitive tiers of gear, and also having a game that wasn't created with kind of a good scalability or curve. Almost all the things that I've mentioned currently, you can do regularly by yourself, or you can use a squad if you want to, and nothing really feels taxing unless you're doing something specifically undergeared for it or not optimized for it. And more than that, there's balance in the items themselves, where most things are good enough. You're like, yeah, there are a few things that just feel a little bit better to play with or a little bit wacky, but if you're interested in the Division, there's a great YouTuber, Marco Styles, who did a bit of a dive into the numbers and checking other places. And sure, you still need god rolls, but you're seeing more diversity in what types of marksman's rifles you could use, what type of assault rifles you can use, and more things will just work out fine. And the sheer amount of ways to build and the guns that you can equip that aren't straight up trash is crazy. Is the game perfect? No, but it's definitely worth trying again, or trying for the first time. I did a small review for this years ago, and I said that the game was a good framework for what's to come, but that experience of playing through maybe not the most conceptually unique world, but an incredibly atmospheric and well-crafted world was worth it to me, and also I would recommend it to someone who recognizes that they would enjoy a cover-based third-person shooter with RPG elements. The Division now is what I had hoped the game would have released as. Still, it's just a foundation for hopefully what's to come, but it has fixed glaring issues that allow it to now be a solid foundation. It has fixed blatant failings of the game, and unfortunately, finally has enough content only if you count the DLCs. Granted, the game and its season pass have been on sale in a big way, so it's not too expensive to pick it all up, but I think they need to bundle some or all of that year one DLC into the base game. I'm hoping they do it in the 2.0 patch. If you don't have the DLC, the game is still in a great space. There's just less variety, there's less game modes that you can use. You can still be competitive, it's not like you're buying into power creep or anything like that. I think the DLC is worth it almost solely for the survival mode. Now, I know hearing somebody talk positively about a game might get you amped up. I mean, I'm amped up over here. I've been playing way too much of the Division. But before you decide to jump back into the game, just take a second and try to remember why you had quit the game. Because yes, there are a lot of changes that have changed the Division for the better, but there is a lot of stuff that isn't addressed or are core issues with the game that you just may not like. You may not like that it is a third-person game. You can't go first-person. You may not like that it is a cover-based game. You may not like that the controls feel a little bit, it's not as arcadey as others. You may not like that you can die. You may not like the constant grinding for gear as you move through. And all of that is fine. Don't expect that to be fixed when all they've done is reinforced specific elements of the game. In a big way, what they've done to The Division is very similar to like what Diablo 3 did during the ROS expansion when the smart loot came, when they got rid of Inferno and added Torment. They've basically taken the game and made it a more streamlined, a more pure, a more fun experience for hopefully more people, but it didn't become something that it wasn't. And you know what? Revisiting The Division for 2018, it has really dispelled any wishy-washy feelings I had about Ubisoft. You know, I think I'm doing them a bit of a disservice comparing it to Diablo 3, because especially if you look at how Siege and now For Honor have rebounded, both in the quality of the games being offered, but also in the almost humbleness and the communication of the companies behind them, it takes a lot of guts and ignoring your own ego to pivot hard on design choices that your community is asking you for or stating or just mentioning. But all three of these games, all three of these Ubisoft games just seem to be getting better and better in a sort of gaming climate where AAA games just are ignoring the customer or they're doing the exact opposite. For me, I think The Division is going to hold a bit of a special place for me for Christmas time revisiting. The game has this Christmas theme strung throughout it. You know, something about the tone and the snow of the game playing while it's also gloomy and snowy outside just kind of felt right. It's like that meme of watching Die Hard at Christmas, even though it's not a Christmas movie. You know, these type of games, these loot-based, generally like action RPGs, I love to revisit these games after a lot of time has passed, usually about a year or if like a new season starts, and I think The Division is just going to have a new space. It is going to be my new Die Hard movie, my new piece of media that I consume that is only tangentially relevant to Christmas, and I kind of love it like that. I am thoroughly impressed with how far the game has come. I want to see how far it goes, and if you pull a Destiny 2 and release a Division 2 that is at a lesser state than the Division 1 was when it came out, you're dead to me. But that's going to do it for me. Until next time, this is Fevir. Peace.